My name is Natalie Gray. I'm 43, recently divorced, with a teenage daughter who just started college in Michigan. I live alone in a small craftsman-style house in Durham, North Carolina. It's quiet here. Quieter than I like, most days. The walls remember laughter and arguments and music. But now they echo with a different kind of silence, the kind you feel rather than hear. I didn't mean to start dating again. Not really. After 15 years of marriage that ended with more exhaustion than anger, I thought I was done. I spent a year healing, rebuilding, learning how to eat alone at the kitchen table and sleep on one side of the bed without flinching. But then I met Rob. He wasn't flashy. Not particularly charming. But there was something about the way he looked at me, like I wasn't invisible. He was 50, a widower, thoughtful in that quiet, intentional way that I hadn't experienced in a long time. We met through a friend, exchanged numbers, and after a few weeks of texts and a coffee that turned into dinner, I agreed to meet him again on a Friday night in February. That night, I stood in front of my closet for 15 minutes before pulling out a dark green dress I hadn't worn in years. It still fit, thank God. I added a necklace my daughter had given me for Christmas, pulled my hair into loose waves, and stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't look 25. But I looked like me. A version of me I hadn't seen in a while. We met at a restaurant called The Lark, all dark wood and hanging Edison bulbs, with a menu that leaned upscale but not pretentious. Rob had arrived early and was waiting at a booth near the back. He stood when he saw me, smiling, and I felt my stomach flutter, not fireworks, but a warm breeze. Something promising. He ordered wine for us, and we fell into easy conversation. He told me about his 2 kids, now grown, and his job managing an architectural firm. I shared a little about my interior design business, my obsession with indie rock, and the way I collect old recipe cards from thrift stores. It felt natural. Light. Good. I was in the middle of telling him about a renovation disaster involving a client's wallpaper choice when something shifted. A chill. Not in the air, but in me. You know that feeling when someone's watching you? That prickle on the back of your neck? That's what I felt. Slowly, cautiously, I turned my head toward the bar. And there he was. Ethan Blake. The man I had loved before I met my ex-husband. The man I never quite got over, no matter how much life tried to scrub him from my memory. He was leaning against the bar, dressed in a soft gray sweater that clung to shoulders I remembered too well. His hair was longer, slightly tousled, still that impossibly deep chestnut. His beard was neatly trimmed, his posture relaxed. But his eyes, those rich, green-gold eyes, were fixed on me. Unblinking. I froze. Rob didn't notice. He was talking about his daughter's wedding next fall, about the colors they were choosing, the venue they liked. I nodded, said something I can't remember, but all I could feel was the weight of Ethan's gaze. It had been nearly a decade since I'd last seen him. We had broken up, if you could even call it that, after nearly 2 years of a whirlwind relationship. We were both in our early 30s then, chasing dreams and running from ghosts. He had wanted to move to Seattle to open a small gallery. I had just started my business and couldn't imagine leaving North Carolina. We tried long distance. We tried visits. We tried pretending the silence between calls wasn't growing. And eventually, we just stopped trying. I married someone else. He disappeared from my world. Until now. I turned back toward Rob, who was refilling my water. I smiled weakly, offered a thank you, and forced myself to listen as he asked about my favorite place to travel. I said Italy. I always say Italy. But my mind was still 10 feet away, tangled in a stare that hadn't belonged to me in years, yet somehow still did. 15 minutes passed before I excused myself to the restroom. I didn't go there. I wasn't ready to face Ethan. Not yet. Instead, I walked slowly toward the back hallway, passing the bar. And I felt him stand up. The hallway to the restrooms was narrow and dim, with low lighting that seemed to echo the warmth of the restaurant. I didn't plan on stopping. I didn't plan on turning around. But when I heard his voice, low, rough, familiar, I did. Nat? I stopped. No one else had called me that in years. Slowly, I turned. And there he was, standing just a few feet behind me. Ethan Blake, the man who once made my heart beat so hard I thought it might fracture my ribs. The man who made me believe in the idea of forever before either of us was ready for it. I wasn't prepared for how deeply it would hit me to see him up close again. Time had changed him. There were faint lines around his eyes now, and a touch of silver threaded through his hair. But his eyes hadn't changed. Still green, still intense, still capable of making me forget every rational thought I'd ever had. He didn't smile right away. He just looked at me, like he was trying to absorb every inch of me without rushing. "You look," his voice caught, and he cleared it. "You look incredible." I should have said something polite. Something safe. But all I could manage was a whisper, "What are you doing here?" "I live here now," he said, eyes never leaving mine. "Moved back 6 months ago. Bought a place near 9th Street. I didn't think I'd ever run into you. And yet here we were." I nodded, unsure what to say. My hands felt cold, even though my skin burned under his gaze. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he added, softer now. "You're here with someone." "Yes." I hesitated. "It's just a date. Nothing serious." The words hung in the air longer than they should have. Ethan stepped closer, not too close, but close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something woodsy and warm that made my throat tighten. Memories flickered, of Sunday mornings tangled in sheets, of shared cups of coffee, of his hand on the small of my back when we walked into a room. "Can we talk?" he asked gently. "Not now. Just sometime." I should have said no. I should have told him that we had nothing left to talk about. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered the one word that had gotten me into trouble all those years ago. "Yes." I returned to the table with shaky hands and a smile I couldn't quite hold together. Rob noticed, but he was too kind to ask. He simply kept talking, and I let him. But my thoughts weren't with him anymore. They were with a man who once knew the shape of my laugh, the weight of my silences. Later that night, when I stepped through my front door and leaned back against it in the dark, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I kicked off my shoes and curled up on the couch, phone in hand, fingers hovering. At 11:13 p.m., a message arrived. "Ethan, I meant what I said. You look incredible. I'd really like to see you again. Talk. Catch up. If that's okay." It wasn't okay. But it was honest. And I was tired of pretending I didn't still feel something. I replied. "Me, tomorrow. 4 p.m., 9th Street Bakery. Just coffee." The next afternoon, the bakery was quiet when I arrived. I wore jeans, a soft gray sweater, and boots. Something casual. Safe. But nothing felt safe when he stood up from that corner table and smiled like I was the answer to every question he hadn't asked in years. He hugged me gently, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. But I leaned into it. For just a second. And when he let go, my skin missed him already. We sat. Talked. The usual things at first, how work was going, what we'd been doing, the people we used to know. But slowly, the conversation shifted. "You married him," he said at one point, eyes soft. "I did," I replied. "It wasn't what I thought it would be." "Did he treat you well?" I hesitated. At first. Then, not so much. He didn't pry. Just nodded. "I'm sorry," he said. And I believed him. "What about you?" I asked. "Anyone serious?" He shook his head. "A few things. But nothing that stayed. No one who felt like home." There it was again. That quiet honesty. That vulnerability I used to crave from him. Our coffees went cold. But we stayed. I had forgotten how good it felt to sit across from someone who knew who I was before life softened the edges. Someone who didn't need small talk to fill the silences. When we stood to leave, he walked me to my car. The sky was gray, the wind cool. I turned toward him, unsure of what to say. He didn't speak. He just stepped forward, slowly, giving me every second to pull away. I didn't. He placed one hand on my cheek, and my eyes closed involuntarily at the warmth of it. His thumb brushed along my jaw, and my breath hitched. And then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't bold. It was gentle. Long. Long enough to remember. Soft enough to hurt. Warm enough to melt the chill I hadn't realized I'd carried for so long. When we pulled apart, neither of us said anything. He just leaned his forehead against mine, and we stayed that way for a moment too long. Then I got in my car and drove home with shaking hands and a heart that didn't know what to do with itself. The following week passed in slow motion. My body went through the motions, commuting, working, answering emails, but my mind wandered constantly. To Ethan. To the bakery. To the taste of his kiss still lingering like a faint note on my lips. I hadn't planned on seeing him again. But plans had never held much power when it came to him. On Thursday, he texted. "Ethan, there's a small trail behind Hillcrest Park. You remember it? I walk there sometimes. Want to come?" It was an invitation without pressure. And yet, it made my heart race in the way no one else had managed in years. I told myself I was just going for the fresh air. I told myself I could keep it simple. But when I arrived and saw him leaning against his truck in a gray Henley and jeans, hands in his pockets, eyes lighting up the second they met mine, everything inside me shifted. We started walking, side by side. The trail was lined with amber-colored trees, their leaves crunching beneath our feet like the soft unraveling of memory. Every few minutes, our hands would brush. It felt innocent. At first. Then, halfway through the walk, a gentle breeze swept through, and without thinking, he reached out and tucked a loose strand of my hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered near my cheek. And I leaned into the touch like it was air. "God, Nat," he whispered, almost to himself. "You haven't changed." "I have," I said softly. "In ways you can't see." "Maybe. But you still feel the same." The words landed with a weight I wasn't ready to carry. So I turned, continued walking, heart thudding in my ears. But a few steps later, I felt his hands slide into mine. Warm. Familiar. Right. And I didn't let go. After that, we met again. Once. Then again. And again. At first, it was under the excuse of catching up. Lunch at a diner we used to love. Coffee near the waterfront. One late afternoon, we sat by the lake, the breeze tugging at my sweater, his arm casually draped behind me on the bench. I wasn't cold, but when he pulled me into a hug, I sank into it without hesitation. His chin rested gently on the top of my head, and I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm of his breath soothe every jagged piece inside me. That hug lasted longer than any kiss could have. It was the kind of embrace that whispered, "I've missed you for so long, I forgot how whole I felt when you were near." Still, we didn't talk about what was happening between us. Not yet. We just let it unfold in the silences between words. One night, I invited him over. Not for anything dramatic. Just dinner. Pasta, salad, a bottle of wine that had sat untouched in my cabinet for 2 years. He brought a small bouquet of lilies. I laughed when I saw them. "You remembered," I said. Of course I did. We ate at my kitchen table like old friends, but the air between us was thick with something more. Something tender and electric all at once. When I stood to clear the plates, he followed me to the sink, his hand grazing the small of my back in that old familiar way that used to undo me. And when I turned around, he kissed me again. This kiss was different than the one at the bakery. Slower. Deeper. It wasn't just remembering. It was rediscovery. His arms wrapped around me, strong and steady, and I melted into them. I felt him breathe me in as his lips brushed along my neck, soft and warm and impossibly tender. There were no games. No rush. Just two people holding the remnants of their past and daring, tentatively, quietly, to see what could grow from it. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine again. "I've never stopped feeling this," he whispered. "Me either." That night, he didn't stay over. We weren't ready for that. But as he hugged me at the door, his kiss on my forehead lingered like a promise. I closed the door behind him, leaned back against it, and smiled into the quiet. For the first time in years, I felt like I was stepping back into myself. Not the woman I had become in the wake of a failed marriage, but the woman I had been before everything went sideways. Before I stopped believing in second chances. And Ethan, he made me believe again. It was a Friday night when Ethan came over again. This time, there was no pretense. No shared dinner. No carefully measured conversation. Just us. I opened the door and saw him standing there in a soft charcoal sweater and jeans, holding nothing but the weight of our history in his eyes. He didn't smile right away, he just looked at me like he could see everything I had tried to hide over the past 10 years. The loneliness. The longing. The quiet ache of wanting something I couldn't name. "I didn't want to waste another week pretending," he said simply. "I didn't either," I whispered. I stepped aside, and he walked in. My home, usually still and quiet, felt warmer instantly. Like it had been waiting for him to return. I led him to the living room. A fire crackled gently in the corner, and a soft playlist hummed in the background, nothing dramatic, just faint acoustic melodies. I had lit a candle earlier, more out of nerves than mood setting, but now it glowed between us on the coffee table. He sat down beside me. Close. His thigh brushing against mine. I could smell his cologne, the same cedarwood and citrus I remembered, softened with time but no less intoxicating. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He reached for my hand, and when our fingers laced together, I felt my chest loosen like I'd been holding my breath for years. His other hand rose to my cheek. He looked at me for a long time before he kissed me, like he was asking permission with his eyes, even if his heart had already crossed the line. The kiss was tender at first. A brush of memory. A sigh. Then deeper. Warmer. Slower. I felt his arms wrap around me, and I leaned into him, my hands slipping under the hem of his sweater to rest against his skin. He shivered slightly under my touch, and I smiled into the kiss. We didn't rush. We took our time. His lips moved from mine to my jaw, to the side of my neck, lingering there as his arms drew me in close. I closed my eyes and let myself fall into the sensation of being wanted, of being held, of being known. We pulled apart only to rest our foreheads together. "I miss this," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Me too." We moved to the couch, curled under a blanket. His hand rested on my knee, tracing slow circles as we talked about nothing and everything. I told him about the first time I saw his art in a gallery window. He told me about a dream he had last year that felt like I was in it, even though we hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. Time became slippery, elastic. The hours folded over us like soft linen. Eventually, we stood. I took his hand, and he followed me upstairs. In my bedroom, the light was low, filtered through the cream-colored curtains. My bed was made, but the rest of the room bore signs of real life, a book half-read on the nightstand, a sweater draped over the chair. It wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But he looked at me like I was. He stood behind me as I faced the mirror, his hands gently sliding around my waist. I could feel his breath near my ear, his chest warm against my back. We stood like that for a long moment, watching ourselves. A couple older now. Softer in places. Sharper in others. But still us. Still something real. He kissed the side of my neck, slowly, tenderly. I turned, and we undressed each other in the dim light, not hurried, but reverently. Like every inch of skin was familiar territory rediscovered. When he finally held me in bed, skin to skin, nothing else mattered. It wasn't just the way his hands knew me, or the way our bodies remembered how to move together. It was the way he looked into my eyes as if this, was something he thought about more often than he'd admit. The kisses were slow, deep, full of unspoken truths. He cupped my face as we moved together, and I felt him hold more than just my body. He held my vulnerability, my fear, my need. His mouth brushed across my shoulder, then my collarbone, then back to my lips. Afterward, we lay tangled in the blankets, his chest under my cheek, my fingers drawing lazy lines across his ribs. Neither of us said "I love you." We didn't have to. I woke before the sun. The soft gray of dawn filtered in through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across the room. For a moment, I forgot he was beside me. I lay still, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. Then I turned my head, and there he was, Ethan, still asleep, one arm draped over my waist, his face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in years. There was something raw and tender in that moment. I watched him for a while, letting the reality of everything that had happened the night before settle around me like morning fog. It hadn't been just passion or old chemistry reawakened. It had been something deeper, an intimacy I hadn't dared to feel in years. He stirred slightly, and his arm tightened around me. His lips found my shoulder without fully waking. A soft kiss. An instinctive gesture. My breath caught. I didn't move. Eventually, he opened his eyes, still sleepy, but when they found mine, he smiled. "Hey," he whispered, voice hoarse with sleep. "Hey." We lay there like that, quiet, facing each other, legs tangled in the sheets. No one rushed to fill the silence. There was a kind of peace in it. "I was afraid," I said softly, tracing a line down his forearm, "that it would feel like a mistake this morning." "And does it?" I shook my head. "No. It feels right." His hand reached up, brushed a strand of hair from my face, and cradled my cheek. "Good. Because I've been dreaming of waking up like this for a long time." He kissed me again. Slow and warm. A kiss full of sleepy morning breath and tousled hair and the comfort of skin on skin. Not urgent. Not perfect. Just real. We didn't get out of bed for a long time. Instead, we talked. About the years between us. About the people we had become and the things we had lost. His father's passing. My divorce. The way we had drifted without really understanding why. And in that soft early morning light, it all felt manageable. Forgivable. Even the years we'd spent apart didn't seem so bitter. Maybe they were necessary. Maybe we had needed to lose each other to find ourselves. Eventually, I made us coffee. He wore one of my old flannel shirts, the sleeves too short, the buttons stretched across his chest. I laughed when I saw him in it. He just shrugged. "You always stole my shirts." "Fair's fair." We sipped coffee on the back porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the neighborhood wake up. A dog barked in the distance. The air was cool and still. My head rested on his shoulder, his arm around me, holding me close. "Does this scare you?" he asked quietly. "A little." "Me too." "But not enough to stop," I added. He turned and kissed the top of my head. "Good. Because I don't want to lose this again." The rest of the weekend passed like a memory I didn't want to end. We went for walks, cooked together, talked late into the night. Everything felt unhurried. Like life had slowed down for just the two of us. He stayed again that night. And the next. There were more kisses. More soft laughter in the dark. More long hugs that made me feel like I had come home to something I didn't even know I was missing. But even the sweetest moments can't exist outside of reality forever. On Monday morning, he had to leave for a meeting in Chicago. We stood by the door, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. His arms wrapped around me in a long, grounding hug. He kissed me like he meant it, slow and deep, his hand on the back of my neck, my fingers curled into his shirt. "I'll call when I land," he said. "I'll be here." And when the door closed behind him, I didn't feel empty. I felt full. Like something had been rewoven inside me. Like love wasn't just a memory or a regret. It was real. It was possible. Even at 43. Even after everything. The week passed slowly. I went about my days like usual, work, errands, walks, a bit of painting in the afternoons, but everything had shifted. The world felt softer, quieter somehow. Like it was waiting. Like I was waiting. Ethan called every night. Sometimes we talked for an hour. Sometimes just 10 minutes. But always with warmth, always with honesty. He told me about his meetings, his hotel window view of Lake Michigan, how he'd bought a cinnamon sugar donut that morning and thought of me because I always used to sneak those when we'd go to the farmer's market. I told him about the book I'd started reading, the flowers blooming in my backyard, how I missed the way he made coffee just slightly stronger than I liked, but that I had started doing it his way anyway. Each call stitched us a little closer together. On Friday, he returned. His text was simple. "Just landed. I'll be at your place in 40 minutes. Can't wait to see you." I felt like a teenager again. Butterflies. Nervous smiles. I even changed my shirt twice and lit a candle without thinking. When the doorbell rang, I didn't hesitate. I opened the door, and there he was. Holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, messy and imperfect, but beautiful in the way all real things are. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and the moment I stepped into his arms, everything made sense again. His kiss was firm and full of missing me. My hands found his shoulders, his back. We didn't speak right away. Just held each other there in the doorway, like time had bent itself to give us this moment. "Hi," I whispered against his cheek. "Hi." He took my face in his hands and kissed me again, slower this time. My heart melted into him. "These are for you," he said, handing me the bouquet. I smiled. "They're perfect." So was the night. We cooked together again, nothing fancy, just pasta and red wine. But there was something sacred about the ordinary. How he moved around my kitchen. How we brushed shoulders and shared smiles and stole kisses between boiling noodles and chopping herbs. After dinner, we curled up on the couch with the lights low. His hand rested gently on my thigh, mine tucked into the crook of his arm. We talked about his trip. About the new art project he was planning. About how strange it was that we had found our way back to each other after all this time. "Do you think this is real?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He didn't flinch. He turned to me, took both of my hands in his. "I think it's the most real thing I've felt in years." I looked down at our joined fingers. "I'm scared. I know. I don't want to lose you again." He leaned in, kissed the side of my head. "Then let's not. Let's not run this time." There was something in his voice, firm, grounded. Not just romantic fantasy but real intention. Like he had been thinking this through. Like he wanted it for the long haul. He kissed me again, then again, until we weren't talking anymore, just moving with each other, lips brushing skin, hands remembering every curve, every scar, every place we had once called home. Later, we lay in bed, his chest rising and falling beneath my cheek. "What if we tried this for real?" he asked into the quiet. "You mean, us?" "Yes. You and me. Not just a weekend here and there. Not just memories we visit when we're lonely. I mean a life. Together." I was quiet for a long time. Then I looked up at him. "Are we ready for that? Maybe not completely. But maybe we never will be. Maybe love at this age isn't about certainty. Maybe it's about choosing to show up, even when we're afraid." I smiled, tears prickling in my eyes. I reached up and kissed him, soft and deep and full of everything I couldn't say. "Then yes," I whispered. "Let's try." He held me tighter, and I felt something settle in me. Not fear. Not doubt. Peace. We didn't rush. That's the thing about love when you're older, you don't need fireworks to know what burns real. You crave steadiness. The kind of heat that doesn't scorch, but warms you from the inside out. Ethan and I took it one day at a time, careful but open, learning each other all over again. And in that gentle unfolding, I found a kind of happiness I didn't know I was still allowed to hope for. He started spending more time at my place. A spare toothbrush appeared in the bathroom. His jacket lived on the back of my chair. On Sundays, he made waffles while I read from the newspaper aloud to him, my legs tucked beneath me on the kitchen stool. There were moments of doubt, of course. I'd catch myself wondering, can we really make this last? Will the past creep back in? But every time fear rose, so did Ethan. With a hand at my back. A kiss on my temple. A whispered, "We're okay. We're here." And I believed him. One night, after a walk under a sky so clear it hurt to look at, we stood on my back porch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the crickets. "I keep thinking," I said, "how strange it is that I almost didn't go on that date." Ethan chuckled. "Then I never would have seen you. I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't looked across that room." "I think I would have found you eventually," he said, pulling me closer. "Even if it took 100 more chances." That night, we made love slow and quiet, like it was a language spoken between us, like our bodies knew truths that words were too clumsy to carry. He kissed me like he was making a promise. And I held him like I believed it. Spring rolled into summer. Ethan found a studio space just a few blocks from mine. We'd meet for lunch in the middle of the day, sometimes in paint-smeared clothes, laughing over sandwiches and iced tea. On Wednesdays, he cooked for me. His spaghetti carbonara became the stuff of legend. On Saturdays, we visited flea markets and bookstores, fingers intertwined, the way people do when they no longer care who's watching. Sometimes we fought. Not loud or cruel, but we were both stubborn. There were tears. There were long silences. But we never walked away from the hard parts. That's the difference, I learned. Real love isn't about avoiding conflict, it's about choosing to stay through it. He held me through panic attacks when old wounds reopened. I stood beside him when he struggled with grief over his father's absence, the silence he had never quite made peace with. And through it all, there were hugs that healed. There were kisses that calmed. There were mornings when I woke to the weight of his hand on my hip and thought, this is it. This is what it means to be truly seen. One particularly golden afternoon, we drove out to the coast, just to watch the sunset. I remember standing barefoot on the sand, the wind in my hair, the sound of the waves wrapping around us like a lullaby. Ethan came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "I've been thinking," he said. "Mom? About asking you to move in." I turned to him slowly, heart racing. "Really?" He nodded, his eyes softer than the setting sun. "I want to wake up with you every day. I want to argue over what to watch and share grocery lists and fold laundry together. I want a life with you, Natalie. Not visits. Not weekends. A real, tangled up, perfectly imperfect life." Tears stung my eyes. "Yes," I whispered, pressing my forehead to his. "God, yes." He kissed me there on the beach, the wind dancing around us, the sky on fire. And it wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was ours. In the months that followed, we blended lives in the quiet way people do when they've chosen each other without reservation. His records found a home on my shelf. My cat, Oliver, decided he liked Ethan better than me. We painted a room together. Well, I painted, he spilled, and made it our shared studio. We celebrated small things, the first tomato from our garden, rainy days spent in bed, nights we fell asleep tangled in laughter. There were long hugs in the kitchen, kisses in the hall, the smell of coffee and paint and cinnamon lingering in the air. I used to think romance had an expiration date. That after a certain age, you settled into comfort, not passion. But now? Now I know better. Because I have felt his arms around me on the hardest nights. I have tasted tears on his lips and felt his heartbeat steady against mine. I have laughed until I cried, loved until I healed. And I have discovered that love the second time around doesn't mean starting over. It means continuing the story. But this time, writing it together.